Imagine it's the 1400s. The world is a vast, mysterious place, with many regions still unexplored by Europeans. People rely on maps that are often inaccurate, filled with mythical creatures and speculative geography. The known world is limited to Europe, parts of Asia, and the northern coast of Africa. A big change is about to happen in the world, the age of exploration. This era, spanning from the early 15th century to the 17th century, marks a period of unprecedented global exploration. European nations, driven by the desire for new trade routes, wealth and knowledge, began to venture into the unknown. European countries, curious, ambitious, and wanting to get rich, started sailing across the oceans. They built advanced ships capable of long voyages, equipped with the latest navigational tools like the astrolabe and compass. These explorers were often funded by monarchs and wealthy patrons who hoped to gain immense riches from their discoveries. They wanted to find new ways to trade with the East, because the old ways were blocked by the Ottoman Empire. The overland routes, such as the Silk Road, had become dangerous and expensive due to the control exerted by the Ottomans. This blockade spurred the Europeans to seek alternative maritime routes to access the lucrative markets of Asia. They didn't know they were about to find a whole continent full of resources and culture, Africa. As they sailed down the western coast of Africa, they encountered rich and diverse cultures, vast natural resources, and complex societies. These early encounters would lay the groundwork for future interactions, both positive and negative. This age of exploration changed how the world worked and had a huge impact on Africa. European explorers and traders established new trade routes, bringing goods such as gold, ivory, and spices back to Europe. In return, they introduced European goods and ideas to African societies, leading to significant cultural exchanges. It brought European explorers to Africa, starting a mix of trade, conquest, and cultural exchange. These interactions were complex and multifaceted, involving cooperation, conflict, and negotiation. African leaders and traders engaged with Europeans on their own terms, often leveraging their knowledge and resources to their advantage. While this time brought new opportunities, it also brought a lot of suffering, especially with the awful transatlantic slave trade. The demand for labor in the New World led to the forced transportation of millions of Africans across the Atlantic. This brutal system had devastating effects on African societies, tearing families apart and causing immense human suffering. The legacy of this dark chapter in history continues to impact the world today. Portugal was one of the main countries exploring during the Age of Discovery. This era, spanning from the 15th to the 17th century, saw European nations embarking on extensive overseas exploration. Portugal, with its strategic location and maritime expertise, was at the forefront of this movement. Prince Henry the Navigator, a central figure in this era, played a crucial role. He established a school for navigation at Sagres, where sailors, cartographers, and shipbuilders could collaborate and innovate. His vision and support encouraged Portuguese sailors to explore the west coast of Africa, seeking new trade routes and opportunities. The primary goal of these expeditions was to find a sea route to India, a land renowned for its spices, silks, and other riches. The overland routes were long, arduous, and controlled by various intermediaries, making direct trade difficult and expensive. A maritime route promised greater profits and fewer obstacles. As they ventured further along the African coast, the Portuguese began establishing trading posts. These outposts served as resupply stations for their ships and facilitated trade with local African kingdoms. This marked the beginning of a significant Portuguese presence in Africa, which would have lasting impacts on both continents. Among the many explorers, Bartolomeu Dias stands out. His expeditions were instrumental in pushing the boundaries of known geography. Dias's determination and navigational skills were key in advancing Portuguese exploration efforts. In 1488, Dias achieved a monumental feat by sailing around the southern tip of Africa, later named the Cape of Good Hope. This breakthrough proved that it was possible to reach the Indian Ocean by sea, opening up new possibilities for trade and exploration. The successful navigation around the Cape of Good Hope was a turning point. It demonstrated that the long-sought maritime route to the Indian Ocean was achievable, paving the way for future expeditions and the eventual establishment of a sea route to India. These voyages had profound implications. They not only increased European presence in Africa, but also initiated a period of significant cultural and economic exchange. The interactions between Europeans and Africans would forever alter the course of history for both continents, leading to a complex legacy of exploration, trade, and colonization. At first, Europeans mostly wanted to trade with Africa, but things turned dark with the transatlantic slave trade. The Portuguese needed workers for their sugar plantations in the Americas, so they started taking people from Africa by force. This was the start of a terrible time in history. The slave trade was brutal. Millions of people were taken from their homes and families. It messed up local economies and governments in Africa, leaving a long-lasting impact of pain and inequality. The age of exploration was helped by new technology for ships and map-making. Explorers used new ships called caravels. These ships were easy to steer, which made it easier to sail the oceans. They also had better tools like the astrolabe and compass to help them figure out where they were going. These new tools helped them make better maps, which led to even more exploration and trade. The printing press also helped spread knowledge and maps, so more people could explore. African societies reacted to the Europeans in different ways. Some kingdoms saw a chance to trade and exchange things like gold, ivory, and spices for European goods. This led to trading posts and bigger trade networks, but not everyone was happy. Some African rulers fought against the Europeans, protecting their land and independence. They didn't trust the newcomers and wanted to stay in control. Europeans didn't just walk in and take over. The process of colonization was met with fierce resistance from the very beginning. African societies were not passive victims. They were active defenders of their territories. The arrival of Europeans was seen as a direct threat to their sovereignty, culture, and way of life. This resistance was not just a series of isolated incidents, but a widespread and organized effort across the continent. Many African kingdoms and communities fought back hard to protect their land, culture, and way of life. They employed various strategies from guerrilla warfare to large-scale battles. The bravery and determination of these warriors were remarkable. They were fighting not just for themselves, but for future generations, hoping to preserve their heritage and independence. The resistance was a testament to their resilience and unyielding spirit. They knew the Europeans were dangerous and fought to stay independent. African leaders and warriors understood the stakes and were willing to make great sacrifices. They organized their communities, trained their fighters, and developed strategies to counter the European military tactics. The resistance was a collective effort involving men, women, and even children, all united in their desire to remain free. They fought back in different ways, from actual fighting to making alliances and talking things out. Diplomacy played a crucial role in the resistance. African leaders sought to negotiate with European powers, trying to find peaceful solutions while maintaining their autonomy. They also formed alliances with other African kingdoms and even with rival European nations to strengthen their position. The resistance was multifaceted, combining military, diplomatic, and strategic efforts. Some African leaders even used the fact that European countries didn't like each other to their advantage, playing them against each other. This clever use of European rivalries helped to delay or even prevent colonization in some areas. By exploiting these divisions, African leaders were able to buy time, gather resources, and strengthen their defenses. It was a sophisticated and intelligent approach to resistance, demonstrating their political acumen and strategic thinking. There are many stories of African bravery and strength during this time. These stories are a vital part of African history and heritage, showcasing the courage and determination of those who stood up against colonization. Monuments and memorials across the continent honor these heroes, ensuring that their legacy lives on. The resistance against European colonization is a powerful reminder of the enduring spirit of African people and their unwavering commitment to freedom and independence. Even though the slave trade was a terrible thing, not everything between Africans and Europeans was bad. Trade was important. African kingdoms traded gold, ivory, spices, and other valuable things for European goods. guns and other things they wanted. This trade, even though it wasn't always fair, did help economies grow and cultures mix. When people explore, cultures meet. This happened with Africans and Europeans. Even though things weren't equal, they shared ideas, beliefs, and ways of doing things. Language, religion, and art were all changed by this. In some parts of Africa, Christianity mixed with traditional African beliefs. African art started to use European styles and materials, showing how cultures mixed together. The age of exploration changed Africa in big ways, both good and bad. It brought new technology, trade, and cultural exchange, but it also brought exploitation, slavery, and colonialism. To understand this time, we need to look at both the good and the bad things that happened. What happened then still affects Africa today. It reminds us that what happens in the world is connected and that it's important to understand history, even the complicated parts.